What's up, guys? Got asked to make a video about how to stay composed in a fight and how to basically not get so nervous and how to deal with the pressure of a real fight situation, right? And this could be a very broad answer. So I would say there's multiple answers here. One of them is depending on how much amateur experience you have. If you're a how much sparring experience you have. These are the two major ones for me that I would say. It's hard to, here's an example. I'll use come up, right? My career early on, starting and how I navigated this very well. Now, you might not have this option or this opportunity, but this is how I did it, right? I started off, I wanted to go to the UFC. And I saw the UFC and I was ready to go. 2005 was the year I graduated high school. That was the year the Ultimate Fighter reality show came out, and I was obsessed, right? I looked for an MMA gym, and I didn't have one in the little small town I was living in, but there was a boxing gym, so I started boxing. Now keep in mind, I will say this: I'm somewhat of a natural fighter. I was pretty tough. I had really good cardio. I was very tall for the weight class. I had some attributes that helped me for sure, but I also handled nerves very well. I wasn't as nervous as a lot of other people that I saw over the years, and I think a lot of that happened and played out that way because of my early career in boxing. Or my 22 amateur fights I had in boxing. So what happened is I had about 22 amateur fights in about 2.5 years, but really it was about a year. It was really about a year and a half total time because of injuries. I had surgery on my shoulder. I had multiple injuries. So really about a year and a half, I had 20 amateur boxing fights. So then I moved into the city from this country town and moved into the city and started doing MMA. And I only did kickboxing for 3 or 4 months, and I just ran off a bunch of amateur MMA fights. I was 4-1 as an amateur MMA fighter. I lost one fight. I got armbarred by a way more experienced guy and everything, and it was a good learning experience for me at the time, for sure. He was a college wrestler. He was a Hilson Gracie brown belt at the time, and I had been grappling for 5 months, basically. I'd been kicking for 4 months. So it was a good learning experience. But the rest of the guys that I fought and beat, some of these guys were higher belts than me. They were purple belts. They were brown belts. But they were scared and they were nervous because they didn't have any other experience like this. They'd never taken a boxing or a kickboxing fight, so they weren't used to getting punched in the face. So I have 22 amateur boxing fights. I was a two-time Golden Glove champion, and just all this ring experience really broke the. Like, I remember the first boxing fight I had. I gassed out so bad. I won, but it was crazy. It was 1 minute rounds because it was at the Golden Gloves in 2007. It was my first fight ever, and there was so many people registered at that time that they had to shorten the rounds from a minute and a half to 1 minute. And it was like a sprint. It was a 3 minute round, three 1 minute round fights, and it was like a sprint. And I remember just having the biggest adrenaline dump and gassing, and fortunately my conditioning pushed me over that, right? Well, I go into MMA and I'm going against all these jiu-jitsu guys, and they've never did any real fight with people able to punch them in the face, and they're nervous as shit. They get scared. They had no gas tank. Their adrenaline dump would happen very quickly for them. Well, I'd already experienced that through boxing and got that out of my system. Another thing I had was a lot of hard sparring from boxing, and that helped me be able to deal with the brutality of a fight versus lightly sparring in MMA or kickboxing. That's why I believe in hard sparring some as well. But I would say to get over this initially, guys, you're going to have adrenaline up. There's no way around this. Very few people, if you want to go into a fight, and now this could be a bad philosophy if you don't have good defense, or you let them land first. But one way to get over adrenaline up is finish fast. If you go in there and knock the person out in one round, you probably won't, or submit them in one round, your adrenaline up is going to be irrelevant because everything will happen so fast it'll be over. Now that can be risky too. The only way you train yourself, you're never going to get over an adrenaline dump just getting more tired and way tired in a scenario where it's a fast-paced fight that you're just not used to. You're never going to be able to get over that completely. So the best thing you can do is spar very hard, get your heart rate high in the gym, do some conditioning stuff, run sprints, hit the bag hard. Those are the best things that I know of, honestly, to get your heart rate high. Hard bag work, very hard bag work, sprints, and sparring. Sparring is the best way to get your heart rate high and simulate a fight, is to spar hard because the fight's going to be hard. That's my advice, but you're never going to get over it initially. You're going to have an adrenaline dump. So be prepared for that mentally. and then as much competition experience as you can get. If you can go to a jiu-jitsu tournament every month, it's worth it just to get the experience. If you can take boxing fights, kickboxing fights a little bit before, even smokers where you meet up with other teams and y'all do a sparring session. You meet the smoker. We have a lot of them here in Dallas Fort Worth area, where you and 5 other gyms meet up at gym and y'all spar each other, and there's a crowd. So it simulates a fight, but you're still wearing 16-ounce gloves, shin guards. So it's good protection for the fighters, but it simulates a fight and it really helps them over the nerves of walking out in front of the crowd. Maybe they play music for your walkout and all of this stuff that simulates a fight. I would say try to fight as many of those smokers as you can. If you can fight, if you're an amateur fighter and your goal is to be a pro MMA fighter one day, I would say fight 10 smokers. Go fight amateur boxing, plus go do grappling tournaments, or all of the above. You need competition experience to get over competition adrenaline dumps and competition nerves. It's that simple. Spar hard, going to smokers, going to boxing tournaments, going to kickboxing tournaments, going to jiu-jitsu tournaments, and get competition experience to help you get over this. And at some point, you'll be able to deal with it. People naturally are more nervous than others. This is common as well. But the best advice I can give someone, right, not knowing your temperament, not knowing how naturally you nervous or not, that's the best advice I got. You need to get as much competition experience before you move to the next level. If your goal is to be a sanctioned MMA fighter, you need to get non-sanctioned smokers, sparring sessions, and jiu-jitsu tournaments. Then once you get to the level, you need to make sure maybe fight sanctioned kickboxing and MMA both. Get a few fights there and gradually move your way up in experience level. Maybe you have 10 smokers, maybe you have 5 amateur MMA, then you technically have 15 fights. Even though the smoker was just a sparring session, you walked out in front of a crowd, you were nervous, you had teammates cheering you on, you had their teammates cheering them on, in an audience there supporting both of you. So that those 10 fights, those 10 smokers simulate a real fight. So that's 15 fights before you even turn pro. This is how you get good. I had 20 amateur boxing fights. I had 5 amateur MMA fights, 2 amateur kickboxing fights. I had almost 30 amateur fights, and I had them all within a 3-year time period. That's how I was able to go to the UFC so fast and beat, because I was only 4-0 when I got in the UFC, and it all happened so fast. I had been pro for basically 10 months when I got on the Ultimate Fighter. And all of this I was able to deal with the nerves and the pressure of fighting because I had a good amateur background and I had it relatively quick. This is depending on how much damage you're taking in these fights. I wasn't taking much damage in these fights. Big glove, headgear on in amateur boxing and stuff. I was winning the majority of the fights and wasn't taking a lot of damage. So that matters as well. But if your goal is to go pro and you need to learn how to deal with nerves, then that would be my advice. Move yourself accordingly through each ranking. Through beginner 1 to 2 years training, you fight a lot of smokers and a lot of boxing tournaments and do a lot of jiu-jitsu tournaments. Then the next couple years, you move into sanctioned fights. You move yourself accordingly, and then eventually you're just going to have so much experience. You're going to be able to deal with the nerves. You may always have them, but you're going to be able to deal with them better than a lot of people who don't have that experience. Just my advice, guys. If you're new to martial arts, you're looking for a gym in your area, get my book, The Ultimate Guide to Jiu-Jitsu Martial Arts School and Instructor. Link is in the description. And if you have any other subjects you'd like me to talk about, leave a comment, please. Thank you.